Okay, ladies and gents, and we have, I can't believe I'm saying this again, we have got chaos today spreading right across, well, it seems like the world these days, right across the UK. We're going to get into that, the riots in the different towns and cities that are spreading now. We've got a new report that's just come out on the US and the military. We have the escalation in the Middle East. Gosh, we have got a lot of stories to go over today. So I really hope you've got your house in order, as we often talk about here on the channel. But it is very bright, so I'm going to put my sunglasses on now. And let's begin with the first story then. The UK Prime Minister is meeting police leaders today to try and get a hold on these riots that are going on right across towns and cities in the UK. There's even been somewhat of a media blackout on this. They're talking about a couple of cities. First it was Southport. They also announced on the news that over 100 people were arrested overnight in London. The riots in London, they said, were almost as bad as Southport, but they actually are not talking about the 6 or 7 other cities that, or towns and cities where these riots have absolutely exploded. And this, of course, is all due to the what happened to those children. I've got to choose my words carefully because this video is on YouTube. What happened to those children earlier in the week? They said it wasn't terror related. Now, you know what's interesting? Every single time there's one of these events involving blades, they always say it's not terror related. We're starting to see a pattern here. There's 7 or 8 of these now that have happened, and they keep saying it's not terror related, but they don't actually tell us what it is. They claim it's all mental health. But talking of mental health, we're all going to have to get our mental health in check soon if this escalates in the Middle East. US and EU diplomats have actually flown overnight to the Middle East to have talks with Iran and also a lot of other countries to try to stop an all-out war in the region. And no, I'm not exaggerating here. We are really talking about potentially an all-out war in the region. And actually, the updates are coming so thick and fast that by the time I've recorded this, edited it, uploaded it, it's about 5 or 6 hours later. So there may even be more updates in the meantime. But I was really surprised, somewhat shocked by some of the statements that have come out. We'll mention that in a moment. Just a quick reminder though, if you haven't yet taken advantage of the 90% offer on the wealth psychology in the stock market course, you can do that. And don't leave it too late because there are only so many coupons per day. Yeah, make sure you just get it early. And also the new program, the Cashflow program, the next module comes out this Saturday, which is the blueprint. We're going to do part 1 this Saturday, and then parts 2 to 5 will come out next Saturday. So yeah, let's talk about what's actually happening in the Middle East today. So US and EU leaders are in an absolute frenzy, and they're having meetings with, in fact, I'll have to read all these out. There's 5 or 6 countries in the Middle East. Also Hezbollah, Hamas leaders. We have Beirut, Tehran. They're also going to be going out to Egypt and some other countries to try and stop this from escalating. But there was a comment that came out that just made me somewhat laugh, ironically laugh. It says, everyone since last night is putting pressure on Tehran not to respond and to contain this, claiming that Israel will be held responsible by the United States and European Union. Pfft, really? Really? I think not. You know, you can only say these things to some of these leaders so many times before they kind of realize that you're calling a bluff. And what I mean by this is when they say held responsible. Obviously, the assassinations that took place were illegal under international law. That is the reason why sovereign nations exploding bombs into someone else's nations and killing people there, killing diplomats. Remember, this also happened, I think Israel blew up the, I can't remember where it was, but it was an Iranian embassy and killed, you know, some diplomats and people inside. I think there are military officers inside as well. And again, the US said, don't worry, Israel will be held accountable for what they did here because it wasn't illegal act under international law. You can't just blow up someone's embassy. But nothing actually did happen about that. And again, if you're new to the channel here, I'm just giving you the facts. I'm not getting involved in sides over all this. I'm just giving you the facts of what is legal and what is illegal under international law here. But we have had a statement out from the US, and it said that President Biden did hold urgent talks with Israel as well as other allies and partners with influence over Iran to try to pull all the parties back from the brink of conflict. They say that President Biden did try to convince Netanyahu not to take the actions that were taken as it breached international law. But let's be honest, is he really going to listen to Biden? I don't think so. I really don't. In other news though, this is interesting. At the same time that strike was going on, the US military was bombing locations, what they call bases in Baghdad, Iraq. They say these were members of the Iran-aligned Popular Mobilization Force, and this was all in support of Israel. So this is now another situation. Iraq have now responded. You can see where this is going. It's getting very complicated. But at the same time, you've got these groups firing rockets into Israel. So, it's such a complex situation. There's obviously got to be responses, but what are the correct responses? Feel free to drop a comment below as to what you think here. But I know what one response isn't, and that's what Senator Lindsey Graham has just proposed. This is a resolution he's just put through. He says that the US needs to use all available military forces to stop the Iran nuclear breakout. And this is where it gets really weird then. So Senator Graham, oh boy, he's saying Iran is not allowed, so they are not permitted to own any form of nuclear material. And he said that the US has to stop this with their military, or the full force of their military. And he says it needs to be done now, not later. What exactly is meant by that, you may ask? Well, I think it's quite obvious. It's another war between, this time, US and Iran. Remember, this sounds like Saddam Hussein all over again with the WMDs. Although this time, it is legitimate. Iran does have nuclear capabilities, but it's not as if they are hiding it. They've said for years that they have a program and they're working on it. And now they've just come out, remember I talked about in yesterday's video, and they've announced that they have got nuclear material now. I don't think it's any surprise, and I'm not sure what Senator Graham is really saying here. It seems like he's behind the curve a little bit, saying that if they have now got nuclear capability, that they need to be taken out, basically. Well, they've already said they have, so one thing I do know is that it's beautiful today. In fact, take a look at this. It's a lovely 20 degrees Celsius today, which is about 69 degrees Fahrenheit. And I don't think the camera will do the colors justice. It is gorgeous. And we've just had a major report come out, which I think has really shocked the US military and the commanders. It says the US is not ready for a global war, the commission warns. It states that the US, its citizens, industry, decision makers and the military is unprepared for a war that could kick off with Russia and China and later engulf the world. It says that China has largely negated the US military advantage in the last 20 years. The Pentagon's portrayal of Russia as an acute threat undersells the ongoing and persistent nature of the hazards it poses, especially in space and cyber warfare. Moscow-aligned hackers are expected to sow chaos across the US should war break out. Yeah, and I think that's why they keep preparing us for these cyber attacks, because one of the first things that will get hit is the grid and the infrastructure. That's why I always say, is your stuff in order right now? The report also talks about how the US, the population, which I wouldn't necessarily agree with what they're saying here, but they're saying that the population is massively underprepared for any kind of, I guess, physical exertion is the way I'm reading into it here. Again, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I think there's certain groups, like everywhere in the West, You have certain groups now, they couldn't do 5 push-ups if they, if their life depended on it. They definitely couldn't do any pull-ups. And if they had to run a couple miles, well, I think people would struggle. Again, not criticizing, it's just a fact now. It's just a fact of life. People have become very, very immobile, and the calories intake and the quality of food is real junk. When I go to the US, I'm always amazed at the food aisles, and you look at the ingredients and it's not really even food, it's just chemicals. And the food products are usually owned by one company. One massive corporation owns the entire aisle. It's insane when you compare it to other places. Even if you study the Roman Empire or similar empires, do you know that when they recruited soldiers from the countryside, the soldiers were pretty much ready to go quite quickly. But when they recruited soldiers or people from the city, they had to do all sorts of extra training with them because they just weren't as hardened and they couldn't deal with the same sort of things as the people could from the countryside. This is a well-known, documented fact. But the US is celebrating one thing today anyway, and that is that the F-16s have now arrived in Ukraine. And again, the statement made me smile when I read this. Biden said he's reached this decision to allow US allies to supply Ukraine with F-16s after he received an ironclad assurance from Zelensky. Okay, firstly, there's no such thing as an ironclad assurance, okay? Even if it was a contract, it doesn't make any difference. That these would only be used to defend the country, and they won't be used to attack Russia. Yeah, that's what it says now, but during war, all rules go out the window. But one thing I did find out as I was reading through these reports today, something very interesting, and that's that Russia has actually not been sending forth its best troops or its best equipment in this conflict with Ukraine. And you look at all the statistics, and these are, statistics from both sides as well, because obviously they're swayed depending on who reports on it. But you look at the statistics of the type of equipment that there's been used, what ammunition, what sort of tanks and vehicles and artillery and all the other stuff. And it's really old stuff. And I can understand why that's the case, because they're obviously trying to get through all their old stuff, but they're holding back all of their modern equipment. And it says in this report compiled by NATO that they're obviously doing this because they're preparing for an all-out war with them, NATO. This is what NATO says, of course. In fact, we just had a new statement released. This was quite an interesting one. This is from the top US commander in Europe. This is General Christopher Caboli, and he told Congress that Russia had only lost about 10% of its fleet in Ukraine, indicating it had a lot left in its air power arsenal. And he's saying that this 10% that's been lost is not even advanced stuff anyway, and that in the meantime, just in the 2 years since all of this has been happening, that they've probably built a lot more that we don't know about anyway. Also from NATO, it said Russia's air force would probably lose in a direct engagement with NATO forces, multiple experts have said, because NATO's combined air power is much larger and more advanced. But they said that air warfare experts have warned that Russia's air force shouldn't be underestimated, and they've cautioned that NATO should be ready. And they're also talking about China here. So they're saying that if China was to get involved and support Russia in this and their allies, and this would be a complete game changer, and they've made the recommendation that NATO should try to renegotiate for a more peaceful outcome. And we can't do a walk and talk without covering the weird and wacky, can we? So here we go. According to a new study from Forbes, where they rank the top cities in the world to live, it's very similar to what we talked about last year. And it's nonsense again. Here we go. Number 1 is London for its rich diversity of culture and safety. Sorry, did it say safety? Number 2 is, oh my goodness, Paris, yes. 3rd place is New York, again, for its incredible richness of the people. Okay, so let me just mention a couple things here. Firstly, I've lived all over the world, and I would say, having visited over 70 countries, it's the Asian cities that are the most advanced and the most, well, beautiful maybe. I would say beautiful in a modern sort of architectural way. But I would definitely say that London and Paris are more beautiful in an old architectural way. But there's absolutely no way on earth that London, Paris and New York are safer than other places. There's just no way. In fact, let's talk about Paris for a moment here, because this report talks some absolute nonsense. It said Paris is future-proofing itself with visionary sustainability and an exploding scene of rich cultural diversity. Okay, if I have to hear this cultural enrichment one more time, and how amazing it is. Right, have you seen all the stuff that's going on at the moment? Now, whether you agree with all the riots and all the protests and whatever else is going on, what is the cause of it? And we'll take the sunglasses off again for a minute here. What is the cause of all of this? It is cultural. People are arguing among themselves. Even a lot of these fights that have been going on, do you realize that it's different groups fighting different groups? So anyway, I think I'm going to pass on all this cultural enrichment on my homestead where I grow my, what do they call it? CO2 increasing, methane increasing vegetables and my livestock, and burning my wood burner with the wood from my own forest here, drinking the water from my own spring. You know, I think if give me the choice between a studio type apartment in one of these cities where I can't go out at night and where I live, I think I'll stick with what I've got. But we got to mention the Olympic Village then. We have to mention this over in Paris because the athletes are in uproar. So all this sustainability pledges this year, they decided they weren't going to put air conditioning in the accommodation because it wasn't green enough. Well, have a guess what's happened. Paris hit 30 degrees Celsius, which is around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, with no air conditioning. And some of these people are from cold climates. So it has not gone well. Some of them couldn't even perform, they've said. And then that's without even getting onto the food. The Olympic Committee decided for them what sort of food they would have. So was there meat on the menu? Nope. It was all green, climate-friendly food, which the athletes have said, what's going on? There's not enough calories for us. Can you imagine one of the big shot putters? People doing the shot put and doing this sort of stuff. Here we go, here's your stewed broccoli or steamed broccoli and your stewed cabbage. Oh yeah, that's exactly what I need to throw these massive balls. But even putting all that to the side, have you seen what the athletes have said about Paris? Loads of them, I think it's more than 20 of them now, have been robbed just since the beginning. They've actually been robbed, mugged. Some of their vans were even broken into, broad daylight, and all the stuff stolen. So anyway, if this is one of the best cities in the world to live, I'll pass. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. What am I thinking? Living here. I need to get into one of these cities, yeah. Thanks, Forbes magazine or Time Out from last year, but I think I'm going to take a hard pass. But one thing you shouldn't take a hard pass on is the 90% off sale. Make sure you grab your course, link in the description below. And apart from that, I'll see you tomorrow. Take care. God bless.